We continue our journey of the Gospel of Mark, and as you may know, the Gospel of Mark focuses on the cross, Jesus going to Jerusalem. And we've heard of many places that Jesus goes for refuge. This is one of them. 3 places. Usually he either goes to the desert, let us go to the mountain, or let us get out of Dodge. I'm tired. The people have been following me. I've worked up a full days of preaching, and I need to get over to the other side. Now, we do know in other passages of the gospel that the people got wise and said, oh, he's going to the other side, so let's run around and meet him on the other side. The zeal of God's house consumed Jesus. He wanted everybody to be and to understand the kingdom of God. So why was it that he was asleep? I don't know. Some of the fathers of the church, I think there was Father Pseudo-Jerome. He's not really Jerome. He's Pseudo-Jerome. But he said basically that, he did that so that the other people would not see the lack of faith in the disciples. And so it's been handed down now for 2,000 years of their lack of faith. Jesus encourages each and every one of us today in all our sufferings and all our fears to unite our pain and suffering to the Lord. I'm sure everybody knows about the story of Job, and Job is a very powerful story of a rich man, the man of Uz, and he had a great fortune, and then misfortune fell upon him, and he had 3 advisors. He's going through all this suffering. His cattle are gone, his children are gone, everything. These 3 advisors, and I consider them, and I think Job considered them, consultants. My father is a civil engineer, and one of the enemies of a civil engineer is an architect, a visionary. And the engineer is just rudimentary. It's not going to work. But a common enemy of an engineer and an architect is a consultant. And so these consultants are telling Job, the good Lord spared you. You deserved even more suffering. And Job is there like this, And he has his complaints to God. And here in chapter 38, we have just a little snippet of God's response. And it connects, obviously, to the gospel and the psalm as well. Who is it that can calm the seas? Who is it that can stop the gates of the flood? And for your homework, I want you to read chapter 38 of Job, because there are wonderful aspects from the human perspective of what God does for us. How is it that sun can post in the morning? Who designed all this? Who made all this happen? That chapter 38 in the book of Job is very powerful because it taps into the glory of God, the mystery and glory of God. I think in today's world, we are overwhelmed by technology, and in a certain perspective, there is a wonderment of technology. But we miss the bigger picture. We miss the bigger picture of the gift of nature that grounds us into God's glory. There once was a university student who was on a train, and he saw this old man sitting on the train, and this man was piously praying his rosary. And he came over to the, oh, you heard this one? He came over to the old man who was praying, and he said, hey, sir, I know you like to do those pious beliefs, but there's wonderful technology nowadays, especially in the medical field and biology and all these good things. And the man looked up and he said, oh, that's nice. And he went down and continued his rosary. And that young university student saw him and said, gee, even he had compunction. He said, well, I'll tackle him after he finishes his prayers. And so the man finishes his prayers, and the young university student said, sir, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bother you during your pious practices, but I was earnest in my intent on offering you some magazines that may widen your horizons. And the old man looked up and said, I'm open to that. Here is my calling card. It said, Louis Pasteur, University of Paris. That is a true story. And it seems for those who open their hearts to the Lord, who open their hearts to the wonder of God, even in science, all that science pales to the glory of God. Thomas Aquinas, one of the greatest intellectuals in the church, when he was about to die, he saw the beatific vision of God. He opened himself up to the glory of God. And he said, all that he has written is straw. Burn it all. They didn't burn it, though. We come before the Lord today with Jesus asking those same questions to us. Why are you terrified? A lot of times, our own fears gets into the way of faith. As a matter of fact, sometimes fear and faith are exact opposites. But we dig down deep into our hearts and we say to ourselves, when was there a time, even in my darkest distress, that the good Lord was not with me? How many people can raise their hands with that? That's a trick question. The good Lord is always with us. And we cannot underestimate that passage in the gospel that says Jesus brought them to the other side. Yes, Jesus is with us in this world. Jesus will also be with us when we go to the other side. So let us take comfort in the Lord, who calms our own seas, who heals our inner turmoil. This story reminds me of the first time I went fishing with my father. There was a priest, Father Jack Barrett, and he had a little Boston whaler. And we went up to New Hampshire to Little Squam Lake. I don't know if you're familiar with it. The Loons, Henry, the Loons. That's where that was filmed. And there was a great dark cloud coming as we were on this little whaler and we were fishing. And Father Barrett looked back and saw that big dark cloud, and immediately he started the engines, and we were zipping right along because the storm was about to approach. We got out in time, but it rained and rained and rained, and so we pulled over. And by the way, this is before cell phones. We pulled over into a little station, and there was a diner there, We said, well, let's just wait out the storm, because when you're towing a little boat, you have to wait things out. Meanwhile, back in Lowell, my mother was watching the weather report. And she was terrified. She was afraid. She called the Coast Guard. We got home around 8 o'clock, 8:30, and my father was smiling, and then all of a sudden he saw Mom, his wife. Boom. His face changed. He said, uh-oh, we're in trouble. So needless to say, we all get a little terrified. But the Lord is truly with us in land, in sea, and in air.